The girl with the honey-brown hair was still asleep when the automated voice announced the final stop, and Quintus Cravenholme knew she'd missed her station 3 stops ago. He'd noticed her the moment she boarded at 8th Avenue, carrying the faint scent of jasmine tea and exhaustion, her eyes already half closed as she collapsed into the seat across from him. Most humans couldn't see past his glamour, the subtle magic that made his white hair look merely platinum blonde, his pale skin simply fair rather than marble cold. But even through her drowsiness, she'd glanced at him with something like recognition, as if some ancient part of her soul knew what sat across the rattling subway car. Then her eyes had closed, her head tipping against the window, and she'd been gone. Quintus had ridden this train for 97 years. The Red Line, they called it now, though it had been the Metropolitan Express when he'd first descended into the tunnels, fleeing the pristine prison of the vampire court that existed in the hidden realm beneath the city. He'd been crowned at 23 centuries ago, and he'd spent most of those centuries running from the weight of that crown. The train shuddered to a stop. The only other passenger, a man in a stained jacket, shambled off without looking back. The doors stayed open, waiting, and the sleeping girl didn't move. Quintus stood. He could wake her with a word, send her stumbling onto the platform confused and alone at 2 in the morning. Or he could leave her here to wake in the depot, frightened and lost. Or he crossed the car in 3 silent steps and crouched beside her. Up close, she was lovelier than he'd thought. Early 20s, with freckles scattered across her nose and paint stains on her fingers. An artist, perhaps. She wore a worn wool coat that had seen too many winters, and her shoes were scuffed at the toes. "Forgive me," he murmured, though she couldn't hear. He slipped one arm beneath her knees, the other behind her shoulders, and lifted her as easily as lifting air. She weighed nothing to him, warm and alive in his arms, her head rolling against his chest. Her heartbeat was steady and slow, deep in sleep, and something in that rhythm made his own still heart ache with a longing he'd nearly forgotten he could feel. The platform was empty when he stepped off. He knew this station, had memorized every stop on every line in the city. This was her stop. He'd heard her mention it to a friend over the phone 2 weeks ago. And he'd remembered because he remembered everything, cursed with the perfect recall of the immortal. He settled her on the wooden bench beneath the broken streetlight, arranging her carefully so she wouldn't wake stiff and sore. Her phone was in her hand, the screen dark. Her bag sat beside her, everything safe, everything in place. Quintus pulled the slip of paper from his pocket. He'd written his number hours ago, in the apartment he kept above the Chinese restaurant on 22nd Street, not quite admitting to himself why. Now he tucked it into her coat pocket, his fingers careful not to linger, not to take anything that wasn't offered. He should leave. He should vanish into the shadows and never ride this train again. Instead, he stayed until he heard the approaching footsteps of the security guard making his rounds, then dissolved into the darkness between one breath and the next, watching from the shadows as the guard gently woke her and made sure she got safely to a cab. Only then did Quintus turn and walk into the night, wondering if she would call, wondering if he wanted her to, wondering what he would do if she did. Tessa Ulwin woke to a guard shaking her shoulder and had approximately 7 seconds of pure panic before she remembered falling asleep on the train. But this was her stop. She was at Fletcher Street Station, 3 blocks from her apartment, not at the depot 10 miles away. "You okay, miss?" the guard asked, concerned. "I'm fine, I fell asleep." She blinked at the bench at the platform. "How did I get here?" "Found you just like this. You sure you're all right?" She nodded slowly, gathering her bag, checking her phone. 2:30 in the morning. She'd gotten on the train at midnight, dead tired from a double shift at the gallery. The last thing she remembered was sitting down, seeing the pale-haired man across from her with eyes like winter frost, and then nothing. The guard walked her to the street and hailed a cab despite her protests. It wasn't until she was home, door locked and deadbolt thrown, that she found the paper in her pocket. A phone number written in elegant script that belonged to another century, and beneath it 2 words, "You're safe." She sat on her threadbare couch for 20 minutes, staring at those words, trying to remember. But there was nothing, just the feeling of something gentle and careful, like being carried in a dream. Tessa kept the number for 3 days before she texted it. She told herself she was being paranoid. Told herself it was probably the guard or maybe someone at the station who'd helped her. Told herself there was a completely reasonable explanation. Then she remembered the pale-haired man and his winter eyes, and she wrote, "This is the girl from the train, thank you." The response came 30 seconds later. "You're very welcome. I'm glad you made it home safely. How did you know where I needed to go?" A pause. Then, "I've seen you take this train before. You always get off at Fletcher Street." That should have been creepy. That should have sent her running to block the number and never look back. But something in the honesty of it, the straightforward admission, made her smile instead. "Are you a stalker?" she typed. "No. But I understand the concern. Would you like me to delete this number? She stared at her phone. The smart thing, the safe thing was to say yes. No, she typed. What's your name? That's unusual, so I'm told. And you are? Tessa. And you carried me off a train while I was unconscious, which is either very kind or very serial killer-ish, and I haven't decided which yet. I promise you I have no intention of harm. You were asleep past your stop. I simply made sure you reached the right platform, and then left your number like a creepy business card. I left my number in case you woke, confused and afraid and wanted answers. I didn't expect you to call. Tessa believed him. She didn't know why, but she did. Well, she typed, since you went to all that trouble, do you want to get coffee? The pause this time was longer. Long enough that she thought she'd made a mistake, pushed too far, misread the whole situation. Then, I would like that very much. Though I should warn you, I keep unusual hours. Night shift, something like that. They met at the all-night diner on Washington Street, the one with the flickering neon sign and the waitress who'd been working there since before Tessa was born. She arrived first, nervous in a way she couldn't name, and then Quintus walked through the door and she forgot to breathe. He was beautiful in a way that didn't make sense. White hair that fell to his shoulders, not gray but purely white, like fresh snow. Skin so pale it was nearly luminous in the diner's fluorescent lights. And those eyes, clear and colorless like looking into winter itself. He wore modern clothes, jeans and a dark sweater, but he moved like something ancient, graceful and deliberate in a way that made everyone else look clumsy. Tessa, he said, sliding into the booth across from her. His voice was low and careful with an accent she couldn't place. Quintus, she managed. You're very unusual? He smiled, and it was warm, genuinely warm. Yes, I get that as well. I was going to say striking, that's kinder. He folded his hands on the table and she noticed how long his fingers were, how still he sat. I'm glad you called. I'm glad you left your number, though I'm still not entirely sure why you did. He was quiet for a moment, considering. When he spoke, his words were careful, like he was measuring each one. I've ridden that train for a very long time. I've seen hundreds of people miss their stops, wake up lost and afraid. Usually I do nothing, it's not my place to interfere, but you, he paused. You looked at me before you fell asleep, really looked as if you saw more than you should have. And I couldn't leave you there. What would I have seen? Tessa asked. That's a complicated question. I like complicated questions. Another smile, smaller this time. Then perhaps I'll answer it someday, but not tonight. Tonight, tell me about yourself. You have paint on your hands. She glanced down, embarrassed. I'm a painter, or trying to be. Mostly I work at a gallery and paint when I can afford the supplies. What do you paint? Empty spaces. Mostly. Train stations at night, closed diners, streets after everyone's gone home. Places that are usually full but caught in a moment of quiet. Something shifted in his expression, something that looked like understanding. You paint loneliness. I paint peace, she corrected gently. There's a difference. They talked until the sun started to rise and Quintus began to look uncomfortable, checking his watch with increasing frequency. When the first rays of light touched the window, he stood abruptly. I have to go, but I'd like to see you again if you're willing. Same time tomorrow? Tomorrow, he agreed, and then he was gone. Moving so quickly she almost missed it, just a flutter of shadow and the door swinging shut behind him. Tessa sat in the booth for another 10 minutes, trying to make sense of what she'd just felt. Because it had felt like something, like recognition. Like coming home. Their second meeting was at midnight, at the train station where he'd left her. Quintus was waiting on the platform, and they rode the red line together in comfortable silence, side by side as the city blurred past the windows. Why do you ride the train? She asked eventually. Because it's simple, he said. Because it goes in circles and never really arrives anywhere permanent. Because no one expects anything from me here. What do people expect from you? He turned to look at her, and his expression was tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. More than I want to give. She reached over and took his hand. It was cold, colder than it should have been, but she didn't let go. Tell me. And slowly, carefully, he did. He told her about the world beneath the city, the hidden realm where vampires had lived for thousands of years, building their courts and councils in the spaces between shadows. He told her about being turned at 23, about the maker who'd gifted him immortality and a crown he'd never wanted. He told her about the laws, ancient and absolute, that governed his kind, and he told her about the executions. A vampire king isn't just a leader, Quintus said quietly, staring at their joined hands. He's also the executioner. When one of our kind breaks the laws, truly breaks them, it falls to me to pass judgment. And if that judgment is death, it falls to me to deliver it. We burn in sunlight, Tessa. It's not a kind death. How many? She whispered. 43 in 300 years. 43 vampires walked into the dawn because I commanded it. His hand tightened on hers. I know that doesn't sound like many. I know some would say I was merciful. But I remember every face, every plea for forgiveness, every time I chose the law over mercy. Is that why you ride the train? Why you live in the human world? I've been running from my throne for nearly a century now. I keep a residence in the court. I attend the necessary councils, but I don't rule. Not really. I leave that to my advisors while I pretend to be human up here, riding in circles on the red line. Tessa was quiet for a long time, processing. The train rattled around them, carrying them through the dark. Finally, she asked, "Do you regret becoming king?" "Every day. But I regret more the things I did while wearing the crown." "Why not give it up?" "Because vampire succession isn't about choosing. It's about power, pure and absolute. The only way to stop being king is to be killed by someone stronger. And I am very, very old, Tessa. Very strong. Anyone who tried would die, and I'd still be king with more blood on my hands, so you're trapped." Yes, she leaned her head on his shoulder, and he went very still, as if afraid to move, afraid she'd change her mind. "Thank you for telling me. You believe me. I saw your eyes that first night. I think I knew then, even if I didn't want to admit it." They rode the train until dawn threatened again, and then Quintus walked her home, stopping at the door to her building. He didn't try to kiss her, didn't even try to come inside. He just looked at her with those winter eyes and said, "I'll call you." And he did. Every night for the next month, they met in the dark hours, exploring the city together. He showed her hidden places, forgotten streets, the kind of spots that only someone who'd lived for centuries would know. She showed him her paintings, and he bought 3 of them with money that was clearly older than she was. Gold coins that he exchanged at a bank with a knowing teller. They didn't kiss until the 5th week. It was raining, and they were standing under the awning of a closed bookstore, and Tessa was laughing at something he'd said when he suddenly cupped her face in his cold hands and kissed her like he'd been waiting his entire immortal life to do it. She kissed him back, tasting rain and winter and something ancient and lonely, and when they broke apart, she whispered, "I'm falling in love with you." "I fell the moment I lifted you off that train," he whispered back. Everything changed 3 nights later. Tessa was walking home from the gallery later than usual because of an opening reception. She was texting Quintus, telling him she'd be at their meeting spot in 20 minutes, when someone grabbed her from behind. The man was inhumanly strong, inhumanly fast, and she smelled something wrong about him, something cold and dead. He dragged her into an alley, and she caught a glimpse of his face, pale and twisted with rage. "You're his new pet," the man hissed. His voice was wrong, layered and echoing. "The king's little human plaything. I don't know what you're, liar." He shook her hard enough to rattle her teeth. "Quintus Cravenholm, the merciful king who spared my life 40 years ago when I broke his precious laws. But mercy came with conditions, didn't it? Stay away from humans, never feed without permission, live like a starving dog." His smile was all fangs. "I'm done living like a dog." Tessa's phone was still in her hand. She hit send on the message she'd been typing, praying he'd see it, praying he'd understand. The vampire leaned close, and she felt his breath on her neck, cold and reeking. "Tell your king Lysander sends his regards. Tell him his mercy was a mistake." Then Quintus was there. He materialized out of nothing, moving so fast she couldn't track it, and Lysander went flying backward into the brick wall with enough force to crack the stone. Quintus stood between them, and Tessa had never seen him like this. His eyes were glowing, actually glowing with pale light, and his expression was terrible and beautiful at once. "You dare," Quintus said. His voice shook the air itself. "You dare touch her." Lysander laughed, blood on his lips. "I dared, and I'll dare more. Your laws are chains, your majesty. Chains I'm done wearing. I spared you once. You should have killed me, because now I'm going to kill everything you love, starting with the girl." He lunged. Quintus met him halfway, and the fight was so fast, so vicious that Tessa could barely follow it. They were blurs of motion and violence, and when they finally separated, both were bleeding. Quintus was breathing hard, his white hair wild around his face. "Stand down, Lysander. I'm ordering you as your king." "I don't have a king." "Then you've signed your own execution." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Lysander's expression shifted from rage to something like fear, and he ran, disappearing into the shadows with supernatural speed. Quintus didn't chase him. He turned to Tessa instead, crossing the space between them in 2 strides, his hands gentle despite the violence still humming through him. "Are you hurt? Did he bite you?" "I'm fine." Her voice was shaking. "You came." "Of course I came, Tessa. I'm so sorry. This is my fault. He found you because of me. Who is he?" "A vampire I spared 40 years ago. He'd fed from humans without consent, left them alive but traumatized. The law demanded execution, but I showed mercy. I let him live under strict conditions." Quintus's jaw tightened. "I should have known mercy wasn't enough. I should have seen the rage in him. What happens now? Now I do what I've been avoiding for a century." He pulled out his phone, making a call with sharp, decisive movements. When someone answered, he said simply, "This is the king. Convene the High Council. We have a rogue, and I'm invoking the hunt." The vampire court existed in a pocket dimension beneath the city, accessible through hidden doors that only their kind could find. Quintus brought Tessa through a subway entrance that didn't exist on any map, downstairs that went much deeper than they should have, and into a world that looked like something out of a Gothic dream. It was beautiful and terrible. Vast halls carved from black stone lit by floating orbs of cold light. Vampires in elegant clothes that spanned centuries of fashion, all pale-skin white-haired, all watching as their king returned with a human girl at his side. "This is the High Court," Quintus said quietly, his hand firm on her back. "No one will harm you here. You're under my protection." "Why did you bring me?" "Because Lysander threatened you. Because keeping you in the human world right now is more dangerous than bringing you here. And because," he hesitated, "because I won't hide anymore. Not from my throne and not from what I feel for you." The throne room was exactly what Tessa had imagined and nothing like it. Yes, there was a throne carved from a single piece of obsidian, but it was dusty from disuse. The real power in the room came from the 7 vampires who stood in a semicircle waiting. "My king," the oldest said, bowing. "It's been a long time since you graced us with your presence here." "Too long, Casimir." Quintus's voice was different here, ringing with authority he'd never shown her before. "I've been a coward, and that cowardice nearly cost an innocent her life." He told them everything. About Lysander, about the attack, about the 40 years of failed mercy. When he finished, the council was silent. Finally, a woman with silver eyes spoke. "The law is clear. A rogue vampire who harms or threatens humans must face the sun. You know this, Quintus. I know, and I'll deliver the judgment myself, as is my duty. You've avoided this duty for nearly a century, and I was wrong to do so, but I'm asking you now as your king to let me change the law." The room went silent. "Change it?" Casimir looked genuinely shocked. "The law has stood for 3,000 years, and it's cruel. We kill our own kind for breaking rules that are sometimes impossible to follow. We offer no rehabilitation, no second chances beyond temporary mercy. We are better than this. We should be better than this. You speak of softness in a world that demands strength. I speak of justice in a world that's only known vengeance." Quintus straightened, and Tessa saw him fully as a king for the first time. "I will hunt Lysander. I will stop him before he harms anyone else. But after that, I'm proposing a new law. Rogue vampires will be given a choice: rehabilitation and binding, magically prevented from harming humans, or exile to the deep places where our kind first came from. Death will be reserved only for those who kill, not those who threaten or break lesser laws, and if the council refuses, then I will enforce the old law as required, but I will ask again and again until you see reason. I've spent 300 years running from this throne because I hated what it demanded of me. I won't run anymore. I'll fight to change it instead." The council debated for hours, and Tessa watched Quintus argue with a passion she'd never seen in him. He was brilliant and fierce, citing precedent and philosophy, appealing to mercy and reason in equal measure. And slowly she watched the council begin to shift. When the vote came, it was 5-2 in favor. "Very well," Casimir said. "The law is changed, pending your successful capture of Lysander. Find him, King Quintus. Prove that mercy can have teeth." The hunt took 3 days. Quintus moved through the city like an avenging angel, following trails only he could sense, backed by a dozen of the court's strongest warriors. Tessa stayed in the pocket dimension, protected by guards and increasingly welcomed by curious vampires who'd heard about the human who'd captured their king's heart. She learned about their world, about the ancient codes and the blood oaths, about how vampires were made and how they could die. She learned that Quintus was considered one of the greatest kings in their history, not because he was cruel, but because he was just. And his long absence from the throne had left a hole in their society. "He loves you, you know," a young vampire named Seraphine told her on the second day. "We can all see it. He looks at you the way humans look at the sun." "I love him too," Tessa admitted. "Will you become one of us?" "I don't know. We haven't talked about it." "You should. He'll never ask. He's too afraid of taking your choice away. But he'll live forever and you won't. That math is cruel." Tessa thought about that a lot over the next day, imagining futures she'd never let herself consider before. On the third night, Quintus returned victorious and exhausted. He'd found Lysander in the old subway tunnels, cornered and desperate. The fight had been brutal, but Quintus had won, and Lysander was now bound in the court's prison, awaiting judgment. "I didn't kill him," Quintus told her, collapsing onto the couch in his private chambers. "Even after he tried to kill me, even after he threatened you, I couldn't do it." "Because you're not an executioner," Tessa said, sitting beside him. "You're a king. I need to offer him the choice. Rehabilitation or exile. Whatever he chooses, he'll never threaten anyone again." "What do you think he'll choose?" "Exile. He's too proud to accept magical binding." Lysander chose exile, just as Quintus had predicted. The council opened a gateway to the deep places, ancient caverns far from human cities where wild vampires still lived, and Lysander walked through it without looking back. "The law is fulfilled," Casimir announced. "The rogue is dealt with and no one died. Perhaps your mercy has wisdom after all, my king." "It's not mercy," Quintus said tiredly. It's just refusing to be cruel when I have the power to be kind. That night he took Tessa back to the human world, riding the red line together in comfortable silence. When they reached her stop, he walked her home, and at her door she turned to him. "Move in with me," she said. He blinked, surprised. "What? I'm not asking you to give up the court. I'm not asking you to stop being king. But when you're up here in the human world, riding your trains and pretending to be normal, do it from my apartment. Wake up with me, have coffee while I paint. Be with me, really with me." "Tessa, I can't drink coffee." "Then watch me have coffee while you drink whatever vampires drink in the morning. Blood bags, usually." "Great, I'll clear a shelf in the fridge." He laughed, actually laughed, and pulled her into his arms. "You're asking a vampire king to be your roommate. I'm asking the man I love to stop living alone when he doesn't have to." He kissed her then, deep and long, and when they broke apart he whispered, "Yes, to all of it, yes." 6 months later, Tessa woke to the smell of jasmine tea and found Quintus in the kitchen, reading a book in Old English like it was the morning paper. He'd moved in with almost nothing, just his books and his clothes and a quiet presence that filled her apartment with warmth. He still went to the court regularly, ruling with a fairness that had become legendary. The new law had held, and only one vampire in 6 months had chosen exile over rehabilitation. The rest accepted the binding, magical restraints that prevented them from harming humans, and lived peacefully among their kind. And Quintus rode the red line every night, but now Tessa rode it with him, painting the scenes she saw, capturing the quiet moments between stations. "I have something for you," he said that morning, setting down his book. "It's not my birthday. No, but it's ours. 6 months ago tonight, I carried you off a train and left my number in your coat, and you were brave enough to call it." He handed her a small box, and inside was a necklace, a delicate silver chain with a pendant shaped like a train car, and inside the train, visible through tiny windows, were 2 figures, one pale and still, one warm and alive. "It's us," she whispered. "It's us," he agreed. "And I thought, if you wanted, we could make it official. Not marriage, not yet, but a vampire courtship bond. It's a promise that I'm yours and you're mine, for as long as you choose to keep me." "What does it involve?" "You wear the necklace. I wear a matching one. And everyone in both our worlds knows that we're bound together. Does it come with a magical fridge that makes blood bags taste like coffee?" "Sadly, no. Then I guess I'll have to settle for eternal devotion and supernatural protection. Is that a yes?" She kissed him instead of answering, and he took that as the yes it was. 1 year after the night on the train, they met at Fletcher Street Station at midnight. Quintus had planned it down to the minute, and when Tessa arrived, the platform was transformed. Fairy lights hung from every post, and the bench where he'd left her sleeping was covered in jasmine flowers. A violinist stood in the corner, playing something soft and achingly beautiful, and Quintus stood in the center of it all, wearing a suit that looked like it cost more than her apartment, his white hair shining in the golden light. "What is this?" she asked, laughing and crying at once. "This is me asking you to marry me," he said simply. "I know we've talked about it. I know you're not sure about being turned, about becoming immortal, and I need you to know I'll love you regardless, human or vampire, for the rest of your life or the rest of mine. But I want you to be my wife, Tessa. I want to wake up next to you for as long as we have. Will you marry me?" She said yes before he even finished the question. They married on the red line 6 months later, in a ceremony that blended human and vampire traditions. A human officiant and a vampire elder performed the rites, and the train was decorated with flowers and lights as it circled the city. Their friends from both worlds crowded into the cars, human and vampire side by side, celebrating a union that no one had quite seen coming, but everyone agreed was perfect. Quintus's vows made her cry. "I was running when I found you," he said, holding her hands. "Running from duty and destiny and the weight of a crown I never wanted. But you taught me that being king doesn't mean being cruel, that I can be strong and kind at once. You saved me, Tessa, not from danger but from myself, and I will spend every day I have left making sure you know how loved you are." Her vows were simpler. "You carried me home when I was lost, and you've been carrying me ever since, through fear and danger and into a world I never knew existed. I love you, Quintus. I love your kindness and your strength and the way you ride trains in circles just because it makes you feel free. I choose you, today and always." They kissed as the train pulled into Fletcher Street Station, and everyone cheered, human and vampire and all the beautiful impossibility between. 2 years after that, Tessa still hadn't decided about being turned. Some days she wanted it desperately, the chance to stay with Quintus forever, to never have to leave him to time. Other days she loved her humanity, loved the warmth of her skin and the beating of her heart. Quintus never pushed. He told her once, on a quiet night riding the red line, "I'll love you as a human until you die of old age, and I'll grieve you for the rest of eternity. Or I'll turn you tomorrow and love you until the stars burn out. Either way, Tessa, I'm yours. The choice is only ever yours." In the end, she chose immortality, not because she was afraid of dying, but because she wanted more time. More nights riding trains. More mornings painting while he read. More of his laugh and his touch and the way he looked at her like she was the sun. The turning was gentle as such a thing could be. Quintus held her through it, murmuring words of love and encouragement as her heart slowed and stopped, and then after 3 days started again with different rhythm. When she woke, the world was sharper, colors brighter, sounds clearer, and Quintus was there, holding her hand, his winter eyes filled with tears he couldn't cry. "Welcome back," he whispered. "How long was I out?" 3 days, standard for the turning. She sat up, feeling the strength in her body, the coldness of her skin. "I'm really one of you now. You were always one of us. Now you just have the teeth to prove it." She laughed, and the sound was different, richer. Everything was different. But Quintus was the same, steady and warm despite his cold skin, and she knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. They ruled together after that. Not officially, Tessa had no interest in being queen, but she was his partner in all things. She helped him reform the court, bringing human perspective to ancient vampire problems. She painted the hidden realm, capturing its dark beauty on canvas. And she rode the red line with him every night. Because some traditions were worth keeping. 50 years later, they stood on the platform at Fletcher Street Station, the same bench where he'd left her sleeping so long ago. The city had changed around them, towers rising and falling, fashions cycling through decades. But the train still ran and they still rode it, and their love had only grown deeper with time. "Do you ever regret it?" Quintus asked, his arm around her waist. "Giving up your human life?" "Never. Do you regret carrying me off that train?" "Best decision I made in 3 centuries. She leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the lights of the city blur past. Somewhere in her apartment, now expanded to fill an entire building, were hundreds of paintings. Images of train stations and empty streets, of Quintus reading by lamplight, of the hidden court and the world above. A life captured in brushstrokes and color. "I love you," she said, simple and true. "I love you too," he replied, "for all the centuries to come." The train pulled into the station, doors opening with a hydraulic sigh. They stepped on together, finding their usual seats, and as the train began to move, Tessa thought about that first night. About falling asleep exhausted and waking up safe. About the number tucked in her coat and the courage it had taken to send that first text. About the pale-haired man who'd been running from his destiny and the human girl who'd helped him stop running. About love found in the most unlikely places. On the last train of the night, the train rattled on through the dark, carrying them forward, carrying them home, carrying them toward whatever came next. And Quintus took her hand, his touch familiar after decades together, and she squeezed back, grateful for every moment, every choice, every twist of fate that had led them here to this train. To this love, to this life they'd built together, one night at a time, one station at a time, one century at a time, forever.